Okay, welcome part 2 of the UNF Premiere tutorial. So we've established the layout of the program in your editing mode right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go find some media, some video to put into your project. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the project bin and we're going to go to Media Browser. Inside Media Browser, you'll see the individual folders where you need to do it. If you're working off of an SD card, it will be up here. If you're working off of a hard drive that I recommend that you buy it, it'll be up here. I'm working off my Teach flash drive, so if I go ahead and click that, that opens up my folders, okay, in my folder bin. All right, I have a folder down here that you guys will probably have if you're in class, and I've done this with you before, Tetro Editing. Double click on that, okay, and we're going to bring up this sequence shooting folder. What that's doing is that's again loading the original video on the source into the project folder, project bin, okay? So what we can do is you can scroll in here, and as you're scrolling in here, you can see some of them move around, okay? You can see that. There's all kinds of video in here. What we're going to do is we're going to use this clip. Well, let's use this clip right here, okay? Now, how do we get it to the source window? Well, there's a couple of things. You can double click on it. It'll open up the files, and there it is in the source window. All right? I'm going to tell you this. How do you get it to the timeline? When you first open the timeline and the project, okay, you're going to do what's called setting up the timeline into the parameters that you want. There's about 4 different ways that you can do this, but the easiest way and the most logical way for you guys to do this is to simply, the only time I want you to click and drag is take a piece of video that you're going to be using, okay? Click, drag it over here to the timeline. And when you do that, it brings up this, and what that actually does is sets up the parameters of the timeline. When I say parameters, the dimensions, okay? We'll learn later in the tutorial of what this means and how this can be, if you don't do this, how it can be affected in your project, okay? So it brings in, it sets up the original dimensions of your timeline. Because you might be using different formats and different cameras and different ways, video, pictures, all these different things, what you want to do is you want to set it up to the format that you're using the most of. And generally speaking, we use a lot of video. So the video format that we would use is whatever you would use the most of. All right. In our case, we use our cameras that you check out from the equipment room, and you would take a clip that's used from that and put it here. Okay. I'll go over some of the mistakes later in a different tutorial, but this is what you do. The reason that does is it automatically sets up the parameters, sets up the dimensions, and then everything else that you put on the timeline is the same dimension. Okay, it's set up correctly. If you don't do this, then you're going to have to go in and change every single piece of video to different dimensions, and it's really more of a pain in the butt than it is to do it. So just go ahead and do this. Now once you do this, I highly recommend that you take the clip that you put on your timeline, you just highlight it by looping it together like this, and just go ahead and delete it, because you don't need it right now, okay? Because you're going to pick your other clips here and you're going to put them in order, all right? So primarily what we're going to do is there's 2 different ways of editing. I'm hoping that you guys will go with my way for these tutorials and from now on, because I think it'll improve your capabilities, your understanding, and it will certainly make you faster. Production way of editing, in other words, movies, videos for digital video production, is done one way. Journalism editing for video, for news, is done another way. And the primary difference is you make your decisions ahead of time instead of waiting to make your decisions. Premiere will allow you to put your video on your timeline and then edit out what you don't want, okay? That's the production way of editing. In my world of the news where I came from, okay, we make decisions before we edit. In production, you put everything on there and then you make your decisions. That's kind of backwards, in my opinion. Because the reality is you can go ahead and just do the exact same thing in your source window, cue to the part that you want, and get rid of the rest, okay? And I'm going to show you that right now. What I mean by that is these two bars right here, that's your timeline bar, or your position bar, okay, on the timeline right here. You also have them here in the source window and here, here in the player, in the final window, the program window, and here in the source window. So you take the timeline here and you move it all the way to the front, all right? You take this one and look at this. You can scroll and decide, okay, well, I like that shot of that car going by, or am I waiting for the red light to turn to green? You can actually pinpoint exactly when you want it to start. Okay, so this video is 7 seconds long, and I'm going to take the beginning of the video all the way to right before that truck comes in, 3 seconds and 17 frames. And I'm going to do an I on your keyboard. I stands for in. Again, I on your keyboard stands for in. And when you do that, that puts a little in point right here, okay? And that's telling the computer, the program, that that's where you're going to start the video that you want, okay? If you go back here, if you want to change the input, you can do that. You just reset it up here and do another I and it will move it, okay? See? It will move it. I'm going to move it back to right before that car goes by, all right? And then I'm going to hit the space bar, which is the play bar, or you can hit play up here, but I hit the play bar and I let it go for about 4 seconds, all right? I'm going to show you something. See this camera move right there, right at the end? You want to get rid of that. So you put the out point right before that. All right? And when I say out point, on the keyboard, there's an O. You hit O, okay? That stands for out. In, out, all right? So what that does is that tells the computer you only want the part of the video of this clip that you want to use. It starts in here and stops here, okay? And then on the keyboard, to get it to the timeline, you don't click and drag, okay? Again, don't click and drag. This is the journalism way of editing, is go ahead and hit period. And it automatically puts it on the timeline exactly where you want and exactly how long you want it, okay? Do you see what I mean? All right. I'm going to go over some things called time codes. On your clip, each clip has a time code. Because of the way we operate here, most clips start at 0. I will go to the beginning. Your time code location is right here for this clip. Your clip name is right up here, okay? So on your clip, your source, 726-7972-01 MP4, your time code is 0000, all right? As you move your cursor, your blue timeline cursor, the time code changes. So when you go to your endpoint, you know it's 3 minutes or 3 seconds and 14 frames, okay? The way to read time code is the last digits right here are the frames. The next digits over are the seconds. The next digits over here are the minutes. And this is the hours, okay? Go back to the frames right here. In broadcast format, there are so many number of frames per second of video. And think of it this way. If I shoot on a still camera and take one picture, that is one frame, okay? If I take a burst of pictures, that's multiple frames on video, okay, or on pictures. In video, it works the same. It's one frame per click, so to speak, okay? But it always does it in a burst. So if you advance one frame at a time, you see the motion there, all right? Now, how many frames are in 1 second of traditional video? The answer to that is 29 frames. 29 frames, and you look up here at 3:27, 3 seconds and 29 frames, and you'll see what happens when I get to 29 frames. It goes to 4 seconds. 29 frames. So in other words, if you were taking 29 pictures in a row with a regular camera, your camera phone, whatever, that will create 1 second of video. That's the way that works, okay? Film is different because film does it in 24 frames, and some films are going to 16 frames. It all goes into quality, a lot of more technical issues than I'm capable of instructing you on. So I'm just going to leave it at that and just remember 29 frames per second, okay? So your timeline here, your time code over here tells you how long the in and the out is. Right now you're at 2 seconds and 29 frames. That's almost 3 seconds, okay? If I were to go back here and put a new input, this number over here is going to change. Now it's 4 seconds, okay? All right. On the timeline, you have 2 locations for time code, right here and right here, okay? That's your timeline, all right? So this one goes with the first one was 2 seconds and 29 frames before it goes to black. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to leave you with this and pick up a next part on actually editing some video on part 3 of our tutorial.